Vice President of Marketing. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's What's New in 4.40.2 release webinar. Before I introduce today's presenter, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. Because of the number of attendees we have on today's webinar, everyone's phones will stay on mute. If you have any questions during the webinar, please enter them into the question window that you see on the lower right of your screen. We'll try to answer everyone's questions at the end of the webinar during the Q&A session. If we're unable to get to everybody's questions, we'll follow up with everyone individually after the webinar. Today's webinar is being recorded. As soon as the recording is available, we will post it on the customer content page of our website and send you an email message to let you know when it's available to be downloaded. On that note, I'd like to introduce today's presenter, Chris Lemonier, our Vice President of Technology, to give you an overview of what's new in our 4.40.2 release. All right, Chris, take it away.
Good morning, everyone, or afternoon, depending on where you are. This is Radio Free DM2 here in Vancouver, Washington. My name, as Tom mentioned, is Chris Lemonier. I'm the Vice President of Technology for DM2 Software. And in case you haven't met me before, here's a picture of me sitting at my desk. It's pretty much exactly the way I look right now, including the Cookie Monster behind my head, checking to make sure everything's going okay. Today, we are going to talk about our newest release, which is DM2 4.40.2. I know that's a mouthful, but I want to give you a little tip. The way DM2 does its versioning, we take Sage's version. So, for instance, Sage is currently shipping Sage software 4.40, and we add a number on the end of it to represent DM2 releases. So 4.40.2 is DM2's second release, or newest release, on the Sage 4.40 platform. So that's how you read those numbers. We call it 4.42. That's the quick nomenclature. If you're on 4.4 now, you're on 4.4.1. So this is our newest version and released on April 1st and is available for install. If you are in the upgrade queue and you're a ways out, you can discuss that with your upgrader about whether you're going to be .1 or .2. It depends on several factors, including whether or not you have already entered a custom review and how far down the upgrade path you are. So if you see something in here today that you think would be fantastic for your business, let your upgraders know so they can talk to you about whether or not you're too far in the process to get it, or whether you can go ahead and switch over to that platform. So let's look at some of the goodies. What I'm going to do is take you through several of the features I pulled out that I wanted to highlight. They cover the entire system. They're features in card lock. They're going to be features in fuel tax. They're kind of random, so we're just going through and showing you features and talking about them. And as Tom said, if you have questions, put them into your chat box in the bottom right-hand side, and we'll get around to those towards the end of the presentation. Presentation scheduled for about an hour. I expect to have between 40 and 45 minutes of slides, so we should leave 10, 15 minutes or so for Q&A at the end if everything goes right. So the very first thing I'd like to talk about is bank reconciliation payment type interface. So currently, when you are processing payments on a sales order header, those entries will go up to the general ledger, but doesn't actually update into the bank reconciliation module. So we've modified the system now. In addition to making the GL entries, those payments and deposits that are on the sales order total screen are updated in the sales order daily sales reports and updates, and they're automatically updated to the bank reconciliation module. Should save you time and reduce entry errors, having to make both entries, and it will eliminate the need to manually enter the payments deposited by bank codes or based on the deposit report. So that's all been automated. So we added a new field in the setup payment. So if you go into AR and you choose the setup payment menu option for payment type maintenance, there is a new field called bank code. You can see it with a little square around it here. And I use green squares through the presentation to identify the changes on the screen or things to draw your attention to. So look for those. In here, you can specify the bank code that this payment is going to be applied to. When you're on the sales order, this screen is the sales order invoice data entry, and you're looking at the totals panel. If the payment type on the totals tab is one that has a bank code tied to it and a deposit amount is entered in the deposit amount field, that amount will be updated automatically to the bank reconciliation module upon completion of the invoice and update. So then when you go over to bank rec, you can see in this particular case, I'm going to jump back, you can see that we had a deposit amount of $122 on the payment type CS1, and you can see that that $122 then appears in the check deposit adjustment entries in bank reconciliation automatically. So you don't have to make that entry, look at the deposit report, go back and do that manually. It all happens automatically for you. Next, we're going to take a look at the Pacific Pride T6 format and the NACS product code support. So Pacific Pride, for those of you that are on the Pacific Pride network, probably aware that PacPride has released a new format for the local bill file and the host info file that you're familiar with. These are the files that your transactions come over in from the controller. So the device you have that talks to your systems on the PacPride network, the file that it sends to DM2 is now this new T6 format. It just has a different layout, but it also has a new feature for NACS product codes. So these are the National Association for Convenience Store product code identifiers for the different products that need to be mapped in to your product setup. So this enhancement now gives the Pacific Pride version of CardLink the ability to support the new local bill CSV, the host info.csv file format. The CSV, for those of you who don't know, is a comma-separated value. It's just a type of file. And the new NACS product codes that Pacific Pride has adopted in their file format. So here we're looking at product code maintenance inside CardLock. So that's under the setup screen when you're actually setting up your products. And you'll notice that we have added a new field called the NACS product code to that maintenance. And the field acts as a cross-reference from the import file to the CardLink product code. So when the local bill files are being imported, if they reference the NACS product code 0042, we can map that into one of your product codes that drives your pricing and drives all your configurations so that you could have several different NACS product codes all pointing to the same product code. That's conceptually how it works, and that's been added to product code maintenance to support the T6. We also modified the actual product code listing. We added the NACS code column, and it will tell you if a NACS product code is not set up. When you're actually converting the transactions, if it refers to a NACS code and can't find that setup, it will issue a warning in the exception report that comes out of the convert and edit. So this is supporting the new format, and it works out of the box. However, you do have to work with Pacific Pride to switch over to the new T6. So as you're ready to do this, we do have retrofit versions of this for some older versions, 4.3 for instance. However, this is now a standard feature in 4.4.2. So if you're upgrading to that, you'll get that. Next item on the agenda is delayed CardLock inventory costing. So CardLock has a little bit of a challenge when transactions are coming through in the convert and edit. When we get the transaction file from the network, and then we convert that file into the system, so we're importing those transactions in. At the same time, it's creating inventory transactions, issues out of inventory to relieve that inventory that was sold through CardLock. The problem is that happens at the same time, but usually the paperwork hasn't been returned back to you yet on the bill of ladings that actually supplied that fuel. So what's happening is you're depleting your inventory at the current cost that the system is aware of, not the actual cost of the fuel that you dropped in. So your margins can be a little skewed. So this modification allows jobber CardLock sites that are remote, delivered by a common carrier, and tracking and deliveries. That can be a paperwork bottleneck. That's what I'm talking about with the bill of ladings. transactions are captured on a daily basis, but the figures for the true in-ground product cost can follow 2 to 3 days later, is when you really find out what that fuel cost you. So we've modified CardLock to delay the costing of your daily CardLock transactions until the inventory cost from your warehouse files have been processed. So it's a way for CardLock to not decide what the transaction really costs until we actually know the real costs from the bill of lading. This will give you more accurate gross margins by ensuring there's actual inventory costs. And we've taken the site system and aggregated that into regions. That allows you to put several sites in a costing region that can all be updated together at the same time. So let's take a look at some of the setup for this. So inside CardLock, and under the CardLink options off the setup menu, there's a new checkbox that says delayed inventory costing. That box is unchecked. The system works exactly the way it always has. So if that works for you, the issues will go ahead and flow to inventory and won't wait for this delayed cost update. If the checkbox is on, then that's going to add this new functionality allowing for you to do the delayed update. In site code maintenance, we've added a new field that contains the delayed costing region. And as I said before, this allows you to group your sites into a group region. So if you have many sites, it could be tedious to go through and update your costs for every single site. But because they're grouped in this delayed cost region, you can update the region, and all the sites in that region will be updated together. So if the site contains a delayed costing region, then the normal inventory process is skipped during the transaction convert and edit. So that basically means that if the site actually has a reference for that region in it, then like I said earlier, when you're doing the convert and edit, it normally would go ahead and create the inventory issues to relieve your inventory, but instead, if it has the delayed costing region, it's going to skip that step, send them in for billing, but won't actually create the inventory transactions until later. If the site does not contain a costing region, then normal inventory processing will occur. So that allows you, if you turn on the delayed costing feature, then you can have some granularity over if there are particular sites that you don't want to delay on, you just don't make them a member of the costing region. To facilitate the actual update of the cost, there's a new menu option in the CardLink main menu. It's called CardLink Delayed Inventory Cost Update. It displays the number of transactions in each site and cost region. So what we're looking at here is that the costing region 01 ABC has 5 transactions in it, and the costing region 02 CDE has 11 in it. If you, in the upper right-hand corner, you saw there's a display transaction button. If you press that transaction button, the screen will show all delayed costing transactions as well. I'm sorry, that's a little typo on my part, but whether or not they have their costing already applied. So in this particular case, you can see that some of the ABCs already have their cost updated. In the CDE and ABC, one of the transactions didn't have its cost. So it gives you a little more detail about which ones have been updated or haven't been updated yet. You can go in and select the costing regions that you want, enter a cost through date, and then select print preview or update in the bottom right-hand corner. So you're picking off the costing region. So you've gotten your bill of lading information back for those regions. You've entered that in the bill of lading, so it actually has the real cost. And now you're going to tell CardLock to update the costs of your transactions and then actually create the inventory issues to relieve your inventory at their actual cost. If you select print or preview, you'll get a report showing the update, so it's going to show you what it's going to do. And selecting update will actually create the inventory issues in detail. Now, one of the nice things is sometimes you might do this and realize that you haven't gotten all of your paperwork and your bill of ladings processed yet. That's okay. As long as you haven't updated the inventory yet, you can actually go back in and clear your cost update flag. So it flags that these transactions have already been cost updated, but you can go back in, say clear the cost update flag, and then actually choose the update. So what it will do is it will unflag those transactions as having been costed and remove the inventory transactions and delete them from the system. So it gives you a little bit of a chance to fix the issue if you haven't gotten all your stuff processed yet, or you're looking at journals and they don't seem right. It gives you a chance to fix that before you've updated the inventory. Once you've updated the inventory, these are committed to history. But it does give you a chance that if you do make a mistake, you can go in and correct that mistake. So that's a lot of words to basically say this process allows for bill of ladings to be updated in inventory to get the actual cost of the product. Then the card lot gallons are relieved from inventory at an accurate cost, and that gets you to an accurate gross margin. So that's the point behind this. That's the idea behind this. It seems like several steps, but it's very similar workflow to how cardlock works now, and your end results are the same. But it gives you that chance to delay your inventory transactions until you have all the information. The next thing we're going to talk about is another Pacific Pride feature, which is support for concurrent fueling. So this is an interesting thing. What happened was Pacific Pride was having a situation where customers were stealing fuel from you guys, and what they discovered is it was multiple transactions happening at a single site simultaneously. So somebody would swipe a card, start the pump, swipe a card, start the pump. The pump's running simultaneously, and the Pacific Pride would allow that to happen. So what they did is, for security reasons, they stopped that and said that these transactions couldn't happen. You couldn't have concurrent transactions. So users could no longer activate multiple pumps without first completing the original transaction. So you had to do the whole transaction and then do the next transaction. So, so they made that change. But then they received quite a few complaints because there were customers who needed to be able to do concurrent fueling for various reasons. So these are customers of the jobbers, customers of the petroleum marketers had reasons for doing it, valid reasons. So Pacific Pride backed off of that and now permits cardholders to simultaneously fuel multiple vehicles at a site, but added a setup flag for the magnetic cards to allow that. So DM2 needed to modify the system to support allowing the concurrent fueling flag for the Pacific Pride transaction. So this is something, I'm gonna mention this again, but this is something that you should make your customers aware of. Can be kind of risky. So if they allow it, if you guys allow that to turn on, there is a possibility for fraud by your end users. So in the driver and vehicle card maintenance, we've added a new flag for concurrent fueling. The checkbox appears right before they allow holidays on the Pacific Pride MAG driver card and vehicle card restrictions, and you can just check the box to allow that. And then what happens is, when the card is set to punch, which means it's what we call it. It's kind of an old term, but when we say punch, what we mean is we're sending the card down to the Pacific Pride controller, then to go out to the network. So you're setting the card up or you're updating the card. That punch, that concurrent flag is sent down. But once again, it's really important that Pacific Pride cardholders know that their daily gallons and their dollar limits may be exceeded when simultaneous fueling transactions take place. So basically, they're basically actively allowing that risk. So, whether you want to default your customers to allow concurrent or whether you don't, that's your choice, but it is something to keep in mind. And obviously, Pac Pride had enough of an issue that they had changed the way they were processing transactions. So just keep that in your thoughts when you're setting up new cards. As most of you know, we've been working diligently on moving our modules up to the new framework architecture, and the latest addition is blending and repackaging. It's called our packaging module on your menus, if you've seen it, and it's used for blending products together and then repackaging products. So if you are taking two things, two items, and blending them together to make a third, or if you're, for instance, putting together items from one pack to another pack. So maybe you're adding a label and some labor, and you're adding a new can, moving something from a gallon drum, a 55-gallon drum down to pails or something like that. You can use blending and repackaging to do that. So we've moved that into framework, and that means that the blending module has been completely rewritten, and it uses the new object-oriented framework. We've talked about that a number of times, what that means, and I'll repeat a little bit of that here shortly. This will help reduce the impact of custom programming may have on the blending module and help to lower your cost of your upgrades. We've been focusing on the framework move for many reasons, but one of them is that the custom programming and your upgrade costs will decline on a framework-enabled module like sales order, AR, inventory, and now blending and repackaging. Now, what does framework mean? Basically, these are the real benefits. It allows layers to be replaced with minimal impacts in other layers of other programs. So, what does that mean? It means that we can replace part of the system with a newer version without affecting other things around it, and that, for you, makes the custom programming easier and faster and lowers the total cost of ownership or TCO for upgrades. So, as you go forward, we're able to much more easily make a modification to the system and give it to you guys in an upgrade without impacting other custom programming or other things that are being done. And that's true of all the framework modules. It also allows something called external object access, and it follows the business rule logic. That's geek gobbledygook, geek speak for supports easier interaction with other third-party add-ons, either from Sage or other master developers. So one of the things it allows you to do is makes it much easier for us to work with, for instance, if you had a third-party warehouse management system and they wanted to integrate into blending and repackaging directly, we can give them tools called an API, or application interface, that allows them to communicate directly with the framework. So that makes their jobs a lot easier and even possible. In some situations, you couldn't do it in the previous version. So this is kind of a big thing, and that also contributes to the lower cost of upgrades and custom programming. The other thing is, in the future, when we're completed with our framework update, it'll allow customer-applied service patches. So this concept is that you guys are probably all familiar with the Windows update, where you get it, where Microsoft pushes out an update to you that may fix a defect or an issue, and you guys get that, get a little pops a little thing on the screen and says, do you want to update your computer? This will allow us to do that. So we'll be able to, if we find a patch or find an issue, we can push that out to the customer base, and then you guys can select to install those at your discretion when you're ready to. So those are some real benefits under the hood of framework. The other thing it does, it supports advanced customization. So the newer versions of MAS, 4.3 and later, have 4.3, 4.4 and later, have very, very sophisticated customization capabilities, where you can go in and add or modify screens. You can create new fields in the database. You can add new tables to the database. You can create workflows based on user-defined fields. So you can do all kinds of things to really leverage your IT resources and the people on your staff that are looking to add a little tweak here, a little tweak there. They can really go in and take advantage of the system to do it. So it takes a lot of the things that you'd need a programmer to do for you and allow you to do it yourself. So this is one of the real benefits of the framework architecture. And it's not just in blending and repackaging, but like I said, equipment manager, inventory, sales order, AR, all of those support this advanced customization. So it's something else to keep in mind as you move up through the later versions that you'll be able to do some of that. So blending and repackaging, this is the finished product recipe maintenance in 4.3 and earlier, 4.4.1 and earlier. So this is the old style screens, and this is what the new finished product receipt maintenance looks like, or I'm sorry, recipe maintenance. So you can see that we have several different layouts on the screen. You can see this is where you're entering data in the old screen. You would actually go in and select a line or key in a separate area. But now in the framework modules, and I'm sure most of you are used to this in GL by now, you'll see that you actually enter that stuff directly in this grid here. There's a few other changes to the screen, like the locations of the browse buttons and things like that. But just wanted to give you an idea that that's what the new blending and repackaging looks like. and it follows that framework module architecture. So this is a picture of production posting. Some of the highlights of this you can see, and this is true of the framework modules, all of them. It has dual grid entry. So there's an upper grid where you can see the item codes, and then there's a lower grid that has description and weight. One of the real cool things in the framework modules about that is that you're able to drag and drop fields from the lower grid to the upper grid. So if, for instance, your operators don't need one of those fields on the screen, then you can actually, if they just wanted item code quantity, you could move those other fields down to the bottom. They still have access to them, but that simplifies their entry when they're working in the screens. It makes it less error prone. So it does support screen resizing now. One of the big complaints we always get is that the screens were fixed in their width and height, but now you can resize them. So if you have a larger screen, or if you have one of those wide screens, you can enlarge and show it that way. All the reports in blending or packaging are crystal based. That's once again a framework thing. When you go into a framework module, its reports are crystal and its listings are crystal. And what's really cool about that is that allows you, because you get a crystal modification license, a crystal developer license when you buy your software, you can go in and change those reports. So if you want to go in and tweak something or make something bold or change the sort, you can do those kinds of things right in the crystal-based report. You can also save those reports off so each user can have their own version of the report. Now it supports role-based security, the new custom office, and has the open object interface. So those are the things, and I know I'm kind of bringing a lot of framework stuff in here, but I always want to remind you guys that those are the benefits you get when you go up into the later versions of Maps. Each module that has moved to framework has all of these features and all this functionality that you can take advantage of. So when you've gone through an upgrade, you may not be thinking about that, but be sure you ask your consultant, or if you want to have us come out and work with you on some things, we can help train you on this kind of stuff so that you can take advantage of these within your own organization, beyond just blending and repackaging. Next item is ticket class for the one-step bills of lading. We have the ability inside bill of lading to create, so if you're putting in a bill of lading and you don't have a sales order to distribute to, you can create your distribution right there. One of the problems is that if that distribution, if that sales order would have come off of a delivery scheduler, so if it had been a scheduled delivery, it would have had a ticket class, but you had no ability to override the ticket class or to access it like you can in sales order. So because you couldn't access it before, it created some issues with processing bills of lading if you decide you don't want to use the default, because there was a default automatically assigned in the Petrolink module, and if you needed to override the ticket class, you couldn't. So we've modified the bill of lading one-step entry. So this is here on the right is the screen that comes up when you choose to enter a one-step bill or one-step sales order. You go in and in the bottom right-hand corner, you can see there's a ticket class field. If delivery schedule is not installed for this particular company, then the field is disabled. So if you have one company that has delivery scheduler and one company that doesn't, it still works just fine, and it won't allow the operator to enter it. So they won't accidentally make a mistake there, but it does give you access to it. It only accepts valid and set up ticket classes, so you can't just key anything in there you want. And if delivery schedule is activated, the operator can't leave the screen without selecting a valid ticket class. So it eliminates a lot of issues that people ran into where the default ticket class didn't match what they wanted. They needed to override it, so they have to go out to sales order, change the ticket class, come back in. It's kind of cumbersome. So this really simplifies that process and streamlines it. So I was referring to the default SO ticket class. If that's actually in the Petrolink options, and if that's set up, then bill of lading will default to that ticket class when you're entering the sales order, and then it can be overridden by the operator. So if you do have a default in there, it'll continue to operate just like it always has with that additional ability now. Okay. Next item, freight follows item tax class. So in MAS 90, MAS 90 has this concept of tax schedules, tax codes, and tax classes. Tax items, physical items, are assigned a tax class. The schedule plus the code plus the class tells you what the rate is going to be that's charged on a particular item. Now, the way we handle freight inside of MAS is that freight is actually an inventory item. So, freight has always traditionally used the tax class assigned to the freight inventory item. So if you went into bill of lading and you distributed some things to sales order and it calculated a freight for you, it would make the entry into the invoice so that the item, the fuel item, would have its tax class, and then freight would have whatever tax class the freight item had. They wouldn't necessarily be the same. So this has limited freight tax to one rate and required the operator to override it if the rate was different than the default. So you'd have to go out in the invoice after bill of lading created it and edit it and change the tax class assigned to the item. So with this modification, you now have the option of setting the freight item to automatically use the same tax class as the fuel item it's associated with. So it eliminates the need to manually re-enter the freight cost and ensure more accurate costing. So what happens is when the lines are created in the invoice by bill of lading, it puts the fuel item on there, and let's say the fuel item has a tax class of TX. Then when it creates the freight item, it looks at the fuel item and makes sure the freight item has the same class, so that they'll end up with the same tax rate reference inside the sales tax setup. So to facilitate that, bill of lading has some new options. Inside of the bill of lading options screen off the setup menu, there's now a new checkbox at the bottom called tax class for freight follows the fuel item. Kind of verbose, but it tells you what it does. If it's defaulted to, it is defaulted to off, and if the flag is off, freight works the way it always has. So if you upgrade and you're happy with the way things are going, you don't have to do anything. That's how we build most things at DM2. We realize that you're using the system every day, and we take the idea that we'll change functionality that would alter the way your system behaved in this kind of way very seriously, and we don't do that. So we try to always default it back to the behavior you expect, so you're not caught off guard or maybe haven't set something up the way you'd want. But if you decide to take advantage of this, you just flip the switch on, and when that flag is enabled, when you update an F type, that's a sales order distribution transaction, contains one or more freight records, it will set the tax class of the freight item to the same class as the fuel item. It does include vendor surcharges, so they will do the same thing along with freight. So the freight tax class then follows through to the invoice. This does only apply to sales orders that flow through bill of lading. The standard sales order processing is not affected. So it will not, just going from a normal sales order to an invoice will not change your operator's tax classes. It will leave them the way they were when they were entered. It's only when freight is being processed by bill of lading that it will do this. All right, the next item I want to talk about is the fuel price table purge utility. We've had a lot of requests for this. This is you're constantly accumulating entries in what we call the FT9 file, maybe by DTN or through manual entry, but you're accumulating these date and time entries over a long period of time. The file gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and it gets more and more difficult to look at, to find the entry you're looking for, even though those prices and things don't mean anything anymore because they're so old and they're kind of irrelevant and everything's been updated and you don't really need it out there. So what we did was we enhanced the system to reduce the time it takes to purge the FT9 transactions that span multiple products and price table code entries. So it gives you the ability to purge transactions based on a date range you select. So you can go in, enter a date range, and then have the system purge those records, taking into account if there are multiple products referring to them or if they have multiple price table codes. All that kind of stuff will take care of it for you. So there's a new menu option on the period end menu for Petrolink. It's called Fuel Price Table Purge Utility. We're not very creative about naming here, so you can blame me. You put in the begin and the end date, and it does exactly what it sounds like. It removes the pricing records based on that begin and end date out of FT9. You do, for safety purposes, get a message. So it will display the number of records that will be purged so that you can see that ahead of time. In this case, 15 records. So if you're expecting 100 records to be purged and it decides to purge 1,000, maybe you want to back up and look at it again, whatever makes sense to you. But you get a nice little warning and you can say no. And it also offers an option to print and preview a report listing Purge data. So you can get a report to see what it's going to do so that you can make the decisions to make sure you have the right select range and you've got it the way you want it. We always try to do that, give you a chance to see what's going to happen before it happens. It gives you a chance to, to do what we call a sort of a gut check on whether or not the data looks right to you before we commit that kind of change. As always, we recommend backing up before you do something like this. So make sure that you have regular backups, and you really should do that anyway. And when I say make sure you have backups, you guys, we run into people all the time who say they back up every day, but they've never verified their backups. So in reality, maybe their system was never backed up. It wasn't set up correctly, or they've got some sort of issue. So make regular backups. Another suggestion, don't use the same backup media. In other words, you don't want to back up Tuesday night's data on the same thing that you back Monday night's data up on. You want to have several days of backup. If you run into an issue, for instance, if you did this purge and you didn't realize, somebody did that, you didn't realize what had happened and a couple days went by, if you're using the same backup media each day, of course you couldn't get back because you would have overwritten it with the purge data. And that's just general backup stuff. If you guys have questions about that, we can talk to you about it, but also really talk to your IT professionals and make sure that's happening. But before you run this utility, we really recommend that you back up the system, especially the FT9 file and the fuel, really the system at large. So this gets some fuel prices out of the system. Well, what about getting some fuel prices into the system? So the next thing is the fuel price import interface. So as you guys know, we have several interfaces to fuel networks like DTN, Axis, and others that give us automatic updates or give us file updates that allow us to import into the system, and they're add-ons that we sell. But we've had a lot of requests for a generic way to get pricing into the system. A lot of customers that we have like to work on their pricing for instance, they'll bring their data into Excel or something, and they'll manipulate it however they want to manipulate it, or their salespeople will manipulate it, and then they'll want to import it into the system. There really wasn't an easy way to do that if that's the kind of thing you were trying to do. So we're releasing with 4.4.2 the new standard fuel price import interface. The enhancement will allow you to import pricing supplied by, for instance, a third-party pricing system that DM2 does not have an interface for. So if you have some other system that you're working with, maybe something homegrown or local, you can supply them our mapping, what our file looks like, and they can map that, and then you can pull those prices right in. You can also export from Excel or another program into a CSV file. So if you save out an Excel file or even from another, really anything, into that CSV file, as long as it matches what our price system expects, then you can import those directly in. It automatically updates your pricing tables as often as needed using that generic format. So you're able to go through and initiate that anytime you want. It will update the price tables with the new price. It will update price tables created by other tables. So if you have reference tables, it generates an error log for any price tables that are not set up, and it will not update if the price does not change. So if you, for instance, are using Excel and you've got all these prices in here and you put in your dates or whatever, and the price didn't change, you're not going to get 100 entries in there of the price not being different. So it doesn't clutter up your pricing system with a bunch of entries that are just repeats of themselves on different days. Really leading to more purges, to be honest with you. Now, where does it appear? It is a new menu option added to our Petrolink modules interfaces menu. You can see it's about 3 down below the DTNs. It says fuel price import. When you launch it, it will ask for it'll launch to a price file import screen. You enter the file name or select it from a drop-down box. If you click on the file path button in the bottom right, it allows you to select the location of your CSV file, and then it shows you the files that are in that directory. So you can pick the one that you want to import. After the import's complete, a screen displays the number of accepted and problem transactions. A log is available to be printed to review any issues. Accepted transactions are updated. Rejected transactions appear on the log, and the import file is then moved to an archive directory. So if you import your data and you end up getting an error on the log and you want to rerun it, because we ignore prices that had come through already, you can put the file back in your directory, fix the issue, and then re-import the file, and we'll only import the ones that didn't get last time. So that's a nice way to be able to work through if you need to make multiple passes to get that data in. You can do this as often as you want, as we said, and we think will provide a nice, quick and easy way to get them in. This is DTN and Axis and the other interface systems that we work with. They have a lot of, for instance, the DTN has an automated tool that allows us to, every 15 minutes, communicate with them and download the transactions. So those things have a lot of robust features in them that really don't make sense here, but this is free. So this is going to come with your 4.2 upgrade at no charge, and you can take advantage of it immediately. Okay, the next feature I want to talk about is the DTN credit cards split fees. So this is you have the DTN interface and you're bringing dealer credit cards in, but you're splitting the fees with the dealer and yourself. So if you have agreements in place with your dealers or consignees to share the expense of credit card processing fees, this enhancement will help you more efficiently process fee splits for the dealer credit card transactions that you're importing from DTN using our optional DTN dealer credit card module. We released a new module called Consignment Stations, and I will talk briefly about that at the end of this presentation. This was to facilitate some things that were going on inside the Consigned Stations module. However, we thought there was value for you guys outside of that, so we decided to make it available as a general feature if you buy the DTN dealer credit card module, where you can actually use the split fees feature. So in the DTN dealer maintenance screen, we've added 2 new fields. There's a percentage of fee, and there's a fee general ledger account. Now this is going to seem sort of obvious, but I want to be sure everybody kind of understands how it works. If the field is set to 100%, the full amount of the fees will be posted to your GL account, so you're responsible for all the fees. If the field is set to 0%, then the fee will be posted to the AR dealer account, so they're responsible for all the fees. If there's a different percentage, then the percent amount goes to the fee GL. So in this case, 35% of the fee is going to go to our GL account. The remaining is going to go to the AR dealer account. So I'm going to leave the screen up for just a second, and I'll say that again. So 100% is me, 0% is the dealer. If there's a different percentage, then that percentage is going into me. It's going into my GL account, and the difference between that and 100 is going to the AR dealer account. So what happens? If the percentage of fee is set something other than 0 or 100, it makes 3 entries in cash receipts. So what it does automatically is make a prepay entry for the gross dollars from the file from DTN crediting AR. So in this case, it made a prepay for $701.52, the gross dollar amount, into accounts receivable cash receipts entry. It did that automatically when you were processing the DTN credit cards. The next thing it did was it created a prepay amount for the remaining percentage of the percentage fee based on the fee in the import. So basically it's a credit AR for a negative amount. So it created an entry crediting AR for $10.75. So it automatically made that second entry for you. And then it made a third entry, which is a prepay entry for the percentage fee. The other part of it is a debit to the expense GL from the dealer maintenance screen for a negative amount. So this is actually your portion of it going to the GL account for the expense GL. So it's making all of the entries to get the fees in the right place. So it's charging the gross amount, taking your portion out, putting your portion on the GL, and making it balance out for what their net payment's going to be. Traditionally, you've had to do this kind of all by hand. So this really speeds that process up, and especially in light of our Consignment Stations module, where you may be dealing with a lot of dealers. You may have 50, 100 dealers you're working with. It can be really time-consuming. So once you have this set up, your operators don't have to worry about it anymore, and all of this gets processed automatically.
So Chris, in the example that you showed a few slides back, you had 35% in there, and that would be the amount that the jobber is responsible for. The other 65% would be his consignee or dealer?
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. That all flows up through the cash receipts journal and update. You'll see the credits for all the transactions, including the fees, and in the daily transaction registry, you'll see that. So you can see here where you've got the general EFT 70152. You've got some other things in there. Then you actually have the AR cash receipts entry. You've got the credit card fees. So you have all that broken out right there on your transaction register going to the GL. And you didn't have to do any extra work to make that happen. Next thing is the Outbox Purge utility. One of the things we've run into over the years has been that records get left in the Outbox entry, the Outbox system. So this is the Outbox screen where you have all the records that are going out. It says they've been released, so they've been sent, but people leave them in there in case they need to resend them. The problem is that as that file grows bigger and bigger and bigger, it generates an error 41. So we get these calls where I now have an error 41 and I need to clear these records in the Outbox, and it's kind of time consuming. So we added a new Outbox Purge utility. So this enhancement gives you the ability to easily purge the records as well as any PDF and body files from your Outbox directory when the list box limits have been reached. It eliminates the error 41 due to having too many records left in the Outbox file. It also keeps the system clean and operating efficiently, but the error 41s are really where we were seeing it. So we added a purge button in Outbox maintenance. We trap the error 41 issues and automatically direct the user to the purge utility. So you don't need to, wait till you get a 41, have the thing blow up, and then go over and purge it. If it's going to get an error 41, so it's got too many records in there, it will automatically open the purge utility for you and direct you to the appropriate thing to do. We also did add the ability to purge for use of regular maintenance by going into Outbox maintenance, selecting the purge button, putting in a date, and then doing the purge. And the program will purge all Outbox entries on or before the date entered that are also flagged as released. So it will not purge something that hasn't been released or sent. So if the maximum number of records is reached, the user is issued a message to perform a purge. So you can see here there are too many items to display, and then you're directed to the purge screen. So it's pretty straightforward, and it keeps the system clean and operating well. We do recommend purging be done as a regular maintenance item, so it's something to think about. Depending on your frequency and the amount of stuff you send, we have customers that send thousands and thousands and thousands of these, so they may want to purge monthly. Other people can go longer than that. It just depends on how many transactions and things are going through Outbox. And it's not just invoices. You start thinking about wholesale price quotes, EFTs, all this stuff going through there. It's quite a bit of things. So you can see here that we have the status of released, and then when you run it for the purge date, it would purge the ones that are marked released. So it won't throw away something that you haven't sent or that you need to hold on to. Okay, the Consignment Stations module. This is a brand new module. When we say module, we mean it exists at the top level of the menu items. So it's like inventory or AR or Petrolink. It is the Consignment Stations. This is pretty verbose, but I wanted to give you an idea of what it is. This is a new web-enabled module that eliminates the need to maintain multiple spreadsheets and manually rekey information by automating 3 processes. So one, the consignees can enter their, so this is a dealer inventory. So this is somebody that you own the inventory at their location, but they're selling it, so like their convenience store. So the consignee needs to tell you how much they sold, all those kinds of things. Well, we have a new web portal that runs on your systems that the consignees can enter their meter and their tank gauge or their stick readings right into a secure and really intuitive web portal from any web browser. And then via an internet connection, the system automatically brings those in the Consignment Stations module. After you review your readings for accuracy and edit them as needed, simply click the Generate Invoices to automatically calculate commissions, generate the invoices themselves, enter meter and tank gauge or stick readings into site tank reconciliation. So it's all tied together, all in an easy step. Because the Consignment Stations is fully integrated with sales order and AR and the site reconciliation feature, it automatically does all those things for you. You don't have to do anything else. The new module also integrates with our optional DT and credit card interface to automatically apply dealer credit card transactions and supports the new split fee feature I mentioned earlier. Now, we did last month, we did an entire webinar on the Consignment Stations module. You can find it at www.dm2.com/customers. When you go there, you'll be prompted to enter your email address and your Sage customer number, and then you can view the full presentation from March's webinar, get the slides, actually watch the webinar itself, just like you're watching now. There's also, all of our webinars are up there, so all the ones we did on the unified inventory update or any of the other ones we've done, you can go there and look at it, as well as this presentation will be up there too. So you can go back and look at it again, or show it to additional people on your staff that maybe didn't have time to attend. So it's a great resource, and I recommend you go if you want to know more about Consignment Stations. So let's do a little quick recap. These are the 4.4.2 enhancements. First was the bank reconciliation payment type. That's sales order, getting a payment put in a deposit amount automatically flowing to bank rec. The Pacific Pride T6 format and NACS product code support. That's the new CSV file format for Pacific Pride, and the NACS product lookup. So if you have the NACS in there, you can pull that over. Remember that to get the T6, you need to work with Pacific Pride, and be sure you coordinate with us to make sure that all that's in place if you decide to go to the T6. Delayed card lock inventory costing, we talked about that being a new system that holds off the inventory postings from card lock until after the bill of ladings have been entered to get you more actual costs and a better gross margin. Pacific Pride Concurrent Fueling support, this is the, you have two pumps running at the same time off the same card, and this allows you to enable or disable that functionality and support on the MAG cards from Pacific Pride. Splitting or packaging and framework. Ticket class for one-step bill of ladings. So if you have dispatch scheduler and you're using ticket classes, you can easily put those on when you're doing a one-step sales order and bill of lading. The freight follows the tax class, so now you can have multiple tax classes for your freight. They'll follow right along with the fuel item that they're associated with if you turn that feature on. The fuel price table purge utility, once again, backup, backup, backup. Make sure you verify your backups before you do any of these kinds of purges. But it's a great utility for clearing out those records. Fuel price import interface, that's the generic pricing system. Also, I did mention earlier that if you do have the DTN pricing import or the Access import or any of the others, you can still use this. So this is just another way for getting pricing in the system. DTN dealer credit card split fees, the Outbox purge utility, and the Consignment Stations module. And those features together make up 4.4.2, which, like I said, was released at the end of March on April 1st, and it's available for upgrade. If you're interested in, if you're in the upgrade cycle now and you're interested in moving to 4.4.2, be sure to talk to your upgrade consultant about where you are in the process and whether that switch can take place and if there's any costs associated with it. Also, if you are considering an upgrade, of course, this is a good time to do it. For those of you who are in heating oil, you're getting out of the heating oil season, so this might be a good time to consider an upgrade to the latest version. Also, I will mention that we'll begin sending out some notifications here soon about end of life for 4.05. So if you're on 4.05 now, pretty soon you're going to begin to see some communications about timelines and schedules for 4.05. So I always recommend that you guys get in line as early as possible and get on the new 4.4.2 platform. So what's up next? On May 10th will be our next webinar. If you haven't seen this yet, you will soon. It's on cloud computing and what does it mean to you. So we're going to talk about what is cloud computing, the history of cloud computing, talk about our cloud computing strategy, what we define as solutions that are already in the cloud, pros and cons, and how you leverage that. So those are some, that's coming up with our next webinar on May 10th. Tom, did you want to make any comments there?
And we'll be sending out an invitation to that shortly after this webinar ends, so you'll see that before the end of today.
Okay. So that brings me to the end. As always, we hope you saw something to get excited about, something that that you just can't live without. That always makes us, warms our heart, makes us very happy. At this point, I'm going to switch it back over to Tom, and we're going to move into the question and answer section of this. Looks like we have about 6 minutes or so, maybe a little longer.
Right, and right at the moment we don't have any questions, so either you've done an extremely good job of explaining everything, which I think you did, or people are just being a little shy or still processing the information here. So why don't we give it a couple of minutes and see if anybody has any questions. If you do have a question, as we said earlier, please enter it into the question chat window that you see on the lower right of your screen. Well, we're not getting any questions in right now, Chris. If anybody has, like I said, it's a lot of information to process. If you can think of questions after the webinar ends, feel free to email them to sales@dm2.com, and we'll be sure to follow up with you and get you answers to those questions.
Sounds great, Tom.
All right, so that looks like it's it. I don't see any questions coming in at the moment. Thank you, Chris. You did a great job. And I would also like to thank everyone for attending today's webinar. And as I said, we'll be sending you out an invite to our cloud computing webinar shortly after this ends here. All right, so we'll go ahead and close this up. And then as soon as the recording is available, we'll send a follow-up message to everybody with a link to be able to access that so you can download it, review it, and share it with anybody else within your company. All right. Thanks again, everyone.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you.